So welcome, first of all, to all our panelists. Thank you for being here. Welcome to all our participants. Thanks for being here as well. And for your interest in this really important topic, trendy or toxic, looking at toxic chemicals in both the fashion and beauty industry. Our host today is my colleague, Yuwa Vosper. So I'm going to let Yuwa introduce the panelists. And then after she introduces our panelists, we're going to hear a recorded video from WEACT's director, Peggy Shepard, who unfortunately was not able to join us in person, but has recorded a message for us to open this panel. So I guess Yuwa, take it away to introduce our panelists, and then we'll hear from Peggy.
Thank you so much. So first of all, happy Fashion Week to everybody out there. We should be, we have good times. We have everybody celebrate the new start to the fashion season, right? So again, thank you all for being here. And we have a spectacular panel here today, and we thank them for giving so much of their time. And we'll tell you a little bit about them. First, we have Andrew Burgie. He is an industrial hygienist. He specializes in worker health and safety training, particularly in hazardous waste, operations, and emergency response. He works at NYU School of Global Health and National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences grant, training with New York State and New York City emergency responders and other occupants, patients regarding health and safety protocols in various capacities. He is an adjunct professor at NYU School of Global Health, specializing in global environmental health, and a member of the American Industrial Hygiene Society, which is a professional society. Before moving to NYU, Mr. Burgie was the co-director of the Center for Occupational and Environmental Health at Hunter College for many years. Thank you, Mr. Burgie, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect, thank you so much. And I was reading on another computer, but now I'm moving it over here. Next, we have Dr. Jasmine McDonald. Dr. McDonald is an assistant professor in the Department of Epidemiology at the Mailman School of Public Health. She received her doctorate in 2009, congratulations, no small feat, from the Biological Sciences and Public Health program at Harvard University. Yes, yes, with a concentration in immunology and infectious disease. She then pursued her postdoctoral training in breast cancer epidemiology from the University of Pennsylvania and Columbia University. She is a multidisciplinary trained molecular epidemiologist whose research program provides unique perspectives and novel studies designed to examine the complexities of breast cancer etiology and risk reduction across the life course. Dr. McDonald is actively engaged with the community from a research and educational perspective on the harmful role of endocrine disruptor chemicals with personal care products. An avid teacher and mentor, Dr. McDonald teaches cancer epidemiology with Mailman and is an assistant director of cancer education at the Herbert Irving Comprehensive Cancer Center and co-director of Yes in the Heights, which is a youth program at the Herbert Irving Comprehensive Cancer Center. Thank you, Dr. McDonald, and we welcome you here. Next, we have Hilary, and I hope I'm saying this right, is it Jochmans or Jochmans?
Jochmans.
Jochmans is the founder of PoliticallyInFashion, a community for all those in fashion, designers, manufacturers, artisans, retailers, models, lawyers, reporters, and consumers to learn about legislative and regulatory issues of key importance to the industry. The mission of PoliticallyInFashion is to educate individuals on public policy and, similar to WEACT, empower them with the knowledge to then engage with elected representatives on how these issues impact companies and consumers. Recent initiatives from PoliticallyInFashion include spearheading advocacy for the creation of a fashion czar in the US and a call to action for the Federal Trade Commission to update the Green Guide, which is a federal regulation designed to assist businesses in making lawful environmental marketing claims and the public at understanding and appreciating these statements. These endeavors have been featured in WWD, which is Women's Wear Daily, Marie Claire, British Vogue, and Fashionista, among others. Before founding Politically in Fashion, Hilary worked on Capitol Hill, and for the New York governor, she holds a degree from George Washington Law School and the University of Virginia. Welcome, Hilary. Thank you for being here. And Kevin Black has over 5 years of experience working in product development and sourcing. He currently holds a production role for Columbus Fashion Alliance, where he manages the production facility as well as corporate production partnerships with companies such as Easton Town Center, Hilton, and Pelotonia. Kevin also has his own fashion line, if I'm noting correctly, and is one of the only designers on our panel. So we welcome him and his real world expertise. And now I'm going to toss it back to the main event, which is our executive director, Ms. Peggy Shepard, who will open with us with some remarks. The sound isn't audible.
So good evening, everyone. Welcome to Trendy or Toxic, understanding how toxins in fashion and beauty industries affect our communities. Now, We Act for Environmental Justice is hosting this event as part of the Fall 2022 Fashion Week. I'm Peggy Shepard, and I have the honor of being the executive director and co-founder of We Act for Environmental Justice, also known as We Act and based in Harlem. Now, for those of you who don't know, We Act's mission is to build healthy communities by ensuring that people of color and low income can participate effectively and meaningfully in creating sound and fair environmental health and protection policies. So why trendy or toxic? Why fashion and beauty? Well, we're not here to give you stylistic advice, although I'd love to, but we're here to give you environmentally sound and just viewpoints. Now, we do this because we care about our environment, we care about your bodies and your health, and we even care about the brands that are selling these products because we want them to be responsible producers. Now, I wish I was able to be here with you today, but due to scheduling conflicts, I am not able to, but I wanted to personally share a message and some comments to you today. So, a primer on what is beauty and fashion sustainability. Well, beauty sustainability, it refers to the fact that personal care products are largely unregulated, and many of the items that you use every day contain toxic chemicals. Everyone is at risk, but women of color face the greatest exposure from the products that are marketed to them because some of those products have the worst amount of toxins as part of those. But to ensure that our community is aware of the risks that are posed by the chemicals that are commonly found in these products, We Act has partnered with the Columbia NIEHS Center for Environmental Health, and the Columbia Center for Children's Environmental Health to bring you a community briefing on cosmetics and other personal care products. And we're calling this campaign Beauty Inside Out. Now, our goal is to raise awareness of the serious health hazards that people face when using these products, as well as to provide suggestions on how you can minimize those risks. Now, when we talk about fashion sustainability, on the other hand, this refers to the environmental impacts of making, wearing, caring for, and disposing clothing. So we have to look at fashion through the creation of the raw material, the processing and manufacture, the actual use, and the end of use of clothing. Where do we throw out our clothes? And what impact may that have on the environment or on each other? So take the production, for instance, of shoes and shirts. Now, that production has more than doubled in the past quarter century, but 3/4 of those items end up burned or buried in landfills. Neither one is good for our health. And then the recycling bins that you might see in stores, they're kind of a guilt-free placebo, but it encourages actually even more consumption because we don't have an end use for the recycling products. Now, there's some known solutions to these issues, and I'll leave it to the wonderful presenters on our panel that you'll hear from today to explore those thoughts with you. But I would be remiss if I did not say that less unsustainable clothing is not sustainable. And with that said, thank you to our distinguished panelists, my staff who has helped put this together, and to all of you for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the discussion.
Yes, thank you so much. So now, without further ado, we'll get into the meat and gravy, as they say, of the panel. So, I mean, it's probably like, who is this person talking? Well, my name is Yuwa Vosper. I am the Policy and Regulatory Manager here at WEACT. I work with the DC office on federal policy. However, I am in New York. I live in the East Village. So currently, I'm a New Yorker, as they say. And so, or maybe not, I haven't been here for that long. So I focus on areas such as toxins, water quality, climate education, and building electrification. And I have a heavy interest in fashion and beauty. I see one of our participants is, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is Aurelia Alia, which the Fashion Institute, Fashion Law Institute at Fordham. I am a graduate of Fordham Law, and I had the pleasure of working with the Fashion Law Institute, Dr. Susan Scafidi and Jeff Trexler, who founded the Institute, where it ignited a whole, grasp of how to marry ethics, fashion, sustainability, and, from a policy perspective. And how can we look at this work holistically, as we heard from Ms. Peggy Shepard. So in that, brainstorming with our Chief of Staff, Frank Joseph, and Beauty Inside Out, Sophia Huda, we decided to do a panel and discuss trendy and or toxic, but not necessarily, as Ms. Peggy Shepard said, not necessarily stylistic trends, but how are we able to enjoy fashion, enjoy beauty, but be aware of what we're purchasing and how we're purchasing products, and also to not only inform, but to just have an overall discussion, which is something quite different, because as we know, New York Fashion Week is all about showcasing trends and various collections, but no one's talking about the implications of these constantly revolving collections, where is this clothes going? As Ms. Peggy Shepard said, it's often burned, especially with the bigger brands, and that's to protect intellectual property, but it's also wasteful. PFAS, which are forever chemicals, and they stay in landmines. And also even using microplastics and certain dyes that are also washing out in our wastewater. And unfortunately, what happens is in environmental justice communities, this impact is seen a lot more because environmental justice communities are the first and the worst. They see the first to experience the worst harms of environmental pollution. And this is also a cumulative burden because a lot of times environmental justice communities are situated next to industrial facilities, wastewater treatment plants, highways, and then you're going into your home, you're putting on clothing, and you may not know it's harmful. You may not know that the plastics are being washed into your in the washing machine and going into the wastewater. You may not know that certain beauty products contain talc and you're putting that on your face. So this is kind of that discussion here to talk about, yes, this is a great time, but there are heavy implications going into that time. So let's bring it on. And also during the time, if you are in the audience, have a question, please enter it into the chat. And we can hopefully we have people fielding questions. So you'll be able to, so hopefully your question will be asked during the session. So I'll kick it off. And this is a question to all our panelists. And I think we can go in alphabetical order to make it fair, right? So tell us more about yourself and your role and how how fashion and toxics and policy, how do you work in there? How do you bring your expertise? And I'm gonna start with A for Andrew.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I guess one of the things I like about teaching the class that I'm teaching, it's global environmental health, is that in fact it encompasses everything. And even though a lot of my background deals with the occupational side, there's also the health factor. So when we think about a situation like this, it's not only necessarily the chemicals themselves that are an issue, it's also, people being impacted by the products, whether they're using it casually. So on the one side, if you think about things like, let's say, hair care products that might have formaldehyde, you have that exposure with people that might be getting, hypertension and so forth, inhalation issues. But then you have the people that are actually providing that service to the person that's getting that Brazilian burn. So it's like, okay, that person, even though they might be getting some chemical exposure, after they have that procedure, they're gone. What happens to the person that's constantly doing that all day long? What happens if they have improper ventilation? So not only is it the person that's being treated, different types of cosmetics, it's also the person that's working there for long periods of time. Same thing goes with the nail care industry. We think about acetone exposure and so forth. So when we talk about knowledge is power, one of the things we like to always talk about is just the chemicals themselves. Are people aware of safety data sheets? What does that mean? How do I find one? How do I look one up? Is it just a matter of Googling, putting the chemical name, putting SDS after it? And then when the information comes up, what do I do with it? Right? So on both sides, it's more of a what is happening to you as the individual. When you start thinking about the chemicals themselves, well, why are these chemicals being used? And according to the FDA, they're saying that, well, as long as this product is being used as directed, we don't have to have that much oversight. So it's a little bit of a loophole for them. So the question is, well, are people using it properly? Are the warnings that are supposed to be there actually on the product? If people do want more information, are the chemicals actually listed on the product? And then what do I do with that information? If people are getting sick, how's that being captured? Is there a mechanism to report that? Is there an organization like yourself where people can come to a place and go, I've been using this particular product and I'm having the following health effects. Oh, if that's happening, there's a mechanism to report that to the FDA and so forth. What do people do with this information? How do they make the correlation between, oh, that chemical causes these health effects. Oh yeah, I do have headaches every now and then when I'm using this product. Because unless you have the reporting, which kind of leads to the, lawsuits, quote unquote, unfortunately, the company's not going to help you out on that. The FDA is not going to provide that information. So it really comes back to knowledge is power. Do people know what they're being exposed to, and then how to report it so that it makes sense to people? And then, not only is it with products with the environment, it's also just, like you said before, the dyes. the azo dyes, the synthetic dyes that are being used. And, our friend Kevin is going to talk about fashion later on. We talk about the aesthetics of color. It's like, okay, these things, retain color pigment better. They have better staying power in synthetic fabrics than natural fabrics. But then you're thinking, well, if it takes 200 tons of water to make 1 ton of product, what are the long-term ramifications of it? Especially when they're in places like China and Bangladesh, where they don't have very much oversight at all. So here's a place that's already being put upon that is now has insufficient drinking water, and they're kind of stuck because they're bearing the burden of a product that they're getting the brunt of. The people that are benefiting from it are not getting the adverse health effects because they're not getting the drinking. So to make a long story short, from my side, I'm trying to figure out not only the occupation and health side, but also the environmental side, but not only the individual, but what kind of work is available? Why is that work only available to people in certain types of socioeconomic levels? How come, if you're going to have that kind of work, can people be better protected? We're not saying that we're necessarily trying to take away people's livelihood, but they do it in such a way that they're not having adverse health problems. Are they getting proper respiratory protection? Do they have proper ventilation? And in our work, we try to point that out to people on different levels, where it's not just necessarily the individual, but it's also the workers. And then what kind of things have to be done to make it more proactive? So it's not the onus on the person to be, I have to know everything, but it's more of I'm lobbying my information and saying, look, I'm not going to buy this product, or I'm not going to do this unless you have the following information, or these following guidelines are being done. Then through that, then the companies will change because they want your business, but they can't do that unless there's a linkage between the health effects and what's happening to the people that are using the products.
Thank you so much. And you brought up some very interesting points from the FDA, the warning labels and the color, and there's great points. So I'm going to move it on. And don't think I didn't do my ABCs in my head when we were talking. I was like, let me get that going. And I'm going to move on to Hilary.
I was doing my ABCs too, and I was trying to decide if you're doing first name or last name. And I was like, okay, Andrew, then all right, I think I'm next. First of all, thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm really honored to be included with these other panelists here to talk a little bit about public policy and the intersection with fashion and beauty. As I said before, I am the founder of PoliticallyInFashion, and I started this in February of 2020. Right? Fashion Week. It seemed like a great time. And then remember what happened in March of 2020, where we all kind of locked down again. But it was actually an interesting time to start because I think when people were at home and we were all craving some sort of interaction and we started a time to sort of think about issues that we cared about and were impactful to us. I was fortunate to be able to connect with a lot of folks who cared about these issues, and PoliticallyInFashion kind of grew. And, we weren't bound by geography or time zones as much anymore because we were all on Zoom or whatever platform we were using at the time to connect and to think about these issues. One of the issues obviously that came up during the pandemic was supply chain issues, right? Who had supply chain sort of on the tip of their tongue pre-March of 2020? And it was not something we talked about normally, but now when it meant we couldn't get our masks, healthcare workers couldn't get PPE, it certainly took on a whole new meaning for us. And then, where is the legislative component to that? Where is the regulatory aspect of that? So we can talk more about some of those issues later. But, one of the reasons I started PoliticallyInFashion was I wanted there to be a community for folks in fashion, whether they be designers or retailers or marketers, artisans, consumers, to come together and think about these issues through the lens of fashion. Like what are the legislative and regulatory issues that are important to this industry? And there are trade associations and groups here in Washington that do that for bigger brands, bigger companies, and they do a fantastic job for their clients. But I'd been searching myself for a space where people like me could engage. And after years of looking and I couldn't find one, I was like, well, maybe it's time to start this. And I found that there really was a group that wanted to have this opportunity to engage, because there is power in volume, right? And how we can come together. And I know designers do care about these things, and I don't want to speak for Kevin, but designers that I've worked with in the past, you have a very lean team, right? You don't have the capacity, the bandwidth to be following a lot of legislation and regulatory issues that are going on, even if it's something you care deeply about. You do an amazing amount with a very slim team. So what we try to do is provide that resource so you can come to us and engage and think about these issues, because Congress is dealing with 1,000,001 issues, right? And you need to be able to have that voice and get your message out there. And we can talk later about a couple of bills that have been perennially introduced every couple of years about FDA regulation of cosmetics, and it just doesn't get the traction. And what's it going to take to move that along? If this is the right bill, maybe it's not. Maybe there needs to be change, but just to even get that conversation going further. And that's what we try to do here with Politically in Fashion. So it's a long way of answering your very short question, but I look forward to talking more and hearing what the other panelists have to say tonight.
Thank you so much. And I just did it in my head. Jasmine is next.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to be here today. And I feel like I missed the memo, me and Dr. Burgie, on the wear black. Was that in the email? Because I'm missing that trend. But I wanted to speak to you how I kind of view this trendy or toxic from a biological standpoint. So I'm a molecular epidemiologist, and all that means is that I use biological methods, tools, hypotheses to examine population level effects. My work aims to reduce breast cancer risk as well as mortality, with a focused interest on Black and Brown persons. My portfolio examines breast cancer risk, though, through a life course perspective, which means that I want to examine breast cancer etiology, risk reduction, not just from the womb, but also through menopause. So those periods of time across a woman's life where the breast tissue may be most vulnerable to these outside external cancer-causing exposures. One thing that's really important is that these exposures are inequitable, and we can get more into that as we go through the session. But as Dr. Burgie has mentioned, as Hilary has mentioned, we really need the impact of true outcomes research to show the effect that these chemicals have, not just on a mouse model, but at the population level and the environmental impact. As it relates to today's topic, I have initiated studies as well as done a lot of community engagement around the role of personal care products, especially hair products, and their deleterious health effects from puberty all the way to postpartum. Thank you.
Thank you. And I find it very interesting you're also considering the menopause aspect. I think that, I mean, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I feel that it's not very much discussed, that portion of a woman's life cycle. And, you know, thank you for that research and expounding on that. And last but definitely not least, Kevin Black. He is our only practical fashion designer on our panel. So he comes with a very special expertise. So tell us about your work, Kevin.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to just speak about my experience as a creative and a fashion designer, and how this trendy but toxic really means to me as a creative. So I started as obviously a designer, and most creatives, we start and we just go right into producing, not knowing or not even thinking about anything with sustainability or any of what could be harmful to the environment, right? So started in about 2015, my brand, and it really had a heavy trajectory. And then I started understanding from my perspective how much waste I was creating. So I would be, we're cutting things, there's scraps. Where does the scraps go? They end up, big bags of scraps, and then you buy fabric, you don't use it, you have it for so long, and then you end up either trying to give it away. But just trying to follow the journey of the fabric led me to understand that, well, where is my garments going? Like, what is the journey of my garment? Which allowed me to kind of dive deeper in to understand from just that standpoint first, how can I be more sustainable in the make of my clothing, and where does that start? The big thing for me is obviously procurement. fashion, we are into synthetic fibers. We love the polyesters. All of those things are super harmful. So understanding that it was really about getting the knowledge and finding where that knowledge was, so I can be more conscious in making specific items in the procurement process. So it's really, for me, I had to learn how to just kind of change my whole process. Whereas I was doing it out of kind of desperation in the beginning of trying to get my brand out there, I was able to get to a point where I was able to consciously make decisions. Yes, it would cost more to get silks and cottons and linens, but I had to make that conscious decision to know that, would this biodegrade? If this garment ends up in a landfill somewhere, what does that do? How would I feel morally about it? Because, even as consumers, we go to thrift stores, we see secondhand things, we were able to upcycle and do our part on that way. But a lot of that stuff stays there. And then where does it go from there? It ends up, like we said, at landfills. And then there's other big brands that burn a lot of their things. And really, it's just because we're all trying to make sure no one gets our unique ideas, our unique takes on things. We don't want to share the information. And with that being said, it's like my goal now, I took a role as a product development manager for Columbus Fashion Alliance, where we are just a space for creatives to create. So I'm able to kind of share that knowledge in the beginning stages of creatives when they're starting their process, what it really means to be environmentally sound with the process and how you produce and the production of fashion garments, and what that really means. A lot of times I'm learning that people really just don't know, and it's just an ignorance. Like they don't know where to find the information. Nobody reads labels. They just don't read it. So it's my work that I'm doing now. I pivoted in 2020 with the pandemic and went more into product development, which is very rewarding. It's helping me really get that mission across. And that also helps me in my procurement process of re-emerging back into the fashion scene and doing a lot more upcycling and doing a lot more lines that are real sustainably focused, and really getting into the initiatives that other brands are doing, and really combining our forces to kind of create a sustainable model to go by to create great fashion. Because a lot of times people equate sustainable fashion as not fashionable or not looking fashionable. So that is my lot in life, to change that narrative that sustainable fashion is fashion and it looks just the same. It's almost like a get you gotcha, like, did you know that this is also sustainable? Most people don't realize it, but you can produce the most beautiful garment and it can be sustainable. So I'm happy to be on this panel and kind of share my findings and what I'm doing in my process.
Thank you. A little fun fact about me, I have a master's degree in fashion, costume history. I tried fashion design, but I have so much respect for a fashion designer, the pattern making, the sewing. My professor kept telling me my items look like chip chop beef, because they did. And but you also learn about all the extra fabric that you're just constantly throwing away in the lab, the salvage waste. It's just taking it off, ripping things apart. Sometimes the trash can bin was just filled with fabric. So I don't think people realize that in the creation, how much fabric is unused. And, as you said, how can we continue to use this fabric? But moving into something you said earlier, and I'm going to open this also up to the panelists, I'm going to kind of pick up from where you left off. We discussed synthetic materials. So there's been a lot in recent articles, New York Times, recently the Business of Fashion, the impacts of synthetic materials, particularly vegan leather, which was formerly known as pleather, but they gave it a more designer name. And many brands, many companies tout vegan leather as more sustainable, more clean, environmentally friendly. But recently, the Higg Index, which is a ratings-based system which was introduced in 2011, came under a lot of scrutiny as experts claim that the index portrayed the increasing use of synthetics as environmentally friendly, but actually had a very heavy environmental toll. So, and I'm going to open this up for whoever wants to go first. I'm not going to do alphabetical order. But how can a consumer ensure they are purchasing materials that are not bearing a toll? And this can also be done from your perspective, such as Mr. Black can talk about how he ensures that in his design perspective, an epidemiology standpoint and a policy standpoint, what can we do to hold brands accountable? And whoever wants to go first. Oh, before we start, I want to say questions are open to the audience. So if you do have a question, feel free to put it into the chat or into the Q&A portion on your bottom of your screen. And our trustee moderators will be able to field your questions. So do not be afraid. Send your questions here. We are ready for them. And we are off. Yes, Dr. Burgie.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for Kevin. When you think about websites like Good On You, what do you think about the way they're projecting clothing as far as trying to address the dye issue? And here are some designers that are using better quality, or I think
honestly, a lot of these sites that are coming up and people are kind of giving their intake and their insight on how to create it sustainably. I found that you kind of have to be in the industry to understand how to do those types of things. I think every creative is different and their process is different. Like for me, I don't technically dye clothing, dye fabric. That's not what I do, but there are ways that people can dye clothing or fabric and use them, but I honestly don't know, because I really don't necessarily do any dyeing. I try to stay away from that just because I find it very, if I'm, in layman's term, if I'm confused to the point where I don't know if this is toxic or not, I just abruptly don't use it. I think for me, like I have specific vendors and mills that I go through that are producing silks and producing cottons and producing linens that I know that are sustainably, sourced, that I stick to those. Just so it keeps it tight. Now I will say it does limit my process a lot, because I have to find very unique ways to create prints and other certain different things that would obviously dyeing the fabric or printing on the fabric would help. But if I try to do anything, it's always water-based. I try to make sure I'm not utilizing anything that has really harsh chemicals. But with like Hilary said, as creatives, sometimes we're always thinking about stuff, and it's also a timing issue too. Like if you're producing a collection, you have to get it out at a certain pace. So sometimes it's very easy to skip steps in a sustainable model just to meet the demand and get the order. So it's tough. It's really tough. And a lot of times people do have their own platforms that they would like to say, oh, we should do it this way, or suggest people to do it other ways. But it's always different, because art is subjective, just like fashion. So we all kind of do it our own unique way. I know a woman here, her name is Celeste. She literally creates her own fabric. That's her way of doing it. She creates it by her complete self. I mean, so she, from getting the wool to making sure the fabric, I mean, she does it all, which is but everybody doesn't have the resources or the money to be involved in the process that much. Hopefully that answered your question.
Not just yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it also pinpointed, as you said, the resources that are necessary to be able to, carry this out, because a lot of people may have a willingness but may not have the resources. So
yeah, and I see that as the big lack, to be honest. It's really the resources. I look at like Women's Wear Daily, I look at Business of Fashion, you know, I look at a lot of trend reporting kind of sites, and all of this information is buried. It's never publicized enough. And we talked about, they're never really talking about it enough. And it really has to start with the makers. That's where it has to start. It starts with us, because if we have the knowledge and we understand how to produce sustainably, then everything else follows suit. But we also have people in the industry that don't care. And they are, unfortunately, these global huge brands that just are only about what the ROI is and exactly, you know, how much money we're making this season, or how much placement we have this season, how many orders we're writing this season, and don't really care about what these fashion items are doing to the environment and just the production of them.
So I want to point out something you said, and you made a very good point. You said if you're confused about something, then you know you anticipate that the average consumer is confused. And I want to bring this back to labels and labeling, and this is kind of going into more, you know, greenwashing and toxins. So a concern is, you know, if we put these disclosure labels, my concern with working with, you know, policy and different policies and laws is that even if we do put on a label, do people understand it? So you put a big chemical name, will people understand what this chemical does? And so my question would be going to, how do we educate the consumer or enlighten the consumer about how to purchase so they can have certain purchasing power to decide what they want to put on their body? And I'll open that up.
Well, I'll say that, you know, I feel that it's the onus should not be on the consumer. The consumer's default choice should be an environmental and public health safe choice. Consumers can be made aware of what a phthalate is, can be made aware what a paraben is, but at the end of the day, it should be a default that they're not in those products such that a consumer can just live life. The consumer's job is not to understand how to be sustainable. A consumer's job is to walk into a store and buy sustainable as the default choice. The problem that exists within our framework is we focus so much on the individual. It's your responsibility to exercise. It's your responsibility to eat right. It's your responsibility to walk around your neighborhood. But there's systemic challenges that make that individual option not the default. And so as policy makers, it needs to be at the local, the federal level, where the default for even green chemistry is affordable and can be trickled down to minoritized businesses so they can afford to create and be creative in a sustainable, healthy way. We have to stop putting the onus on individuals like they have this default option, because oftentimes buying sustainable is not affordable. So the default choice, especially for Black and Brown people, are often not the healthy choice. But then we come back and say, look, you're not doing what you're supposed to do.
If my head was nodding back and forth like a bobble toy, speaking truth to power. Dr. Andrew Burgie, I see your hands up, and then I want to move to Hilary. If we can talk about the green guide.
Yeah, just a quick thing to just piggyback on what Jasmine is saying. One of the things I was thinking about is the individual in a lot of it. I was just trying to think about fashion. It is kind of driven by individuals who are interested in fashion. Because part of the reason why I mentioned the good on you thing is, what's her name? Her name is escaping. Emma Watson is one of the people that's the proponent of that site. And I think about all these designers and all these kids that want to look like these designers. The celebrities were educated as far as, well, if you're coming up with a product let's make something that's sustainable from the get-go. And the fact that they are influential individuals, they can move circuit as far as like, well, yeah, since everyone's trying to look like me anyway, let's try to do it this way that's sustainable. Let's try to do it in a way that they can have knockoffs that can be affordable. And because this person is kind of generating the look, so to speak, everything will kind of follow after them. So if you could get strategic people to sort of get the basics down, this is sort of an opportunity for everything else to follow. Because like you're saying, it's impractical to have every single person reading every single label, to make it stand. But for the bigger people that say, like, it's okay to wear the same thing for us. It's okay to wear something that's not that colorful because, being not colorful, quote unquote, is trendy now. They could move that easier than anybody could. So maybe the opportunities with them as far as, you're not saying that people have to walk around naked, but do they have to have a shirt for every single day? They have to have, and what's wrong with having the same thing, two people wearing the same thing at the same time? These are the people that could push these things and sort of change the way people think about that. That when things that are more sustainable come around, they're more palatable because the people at the core top are sort of champions of it. Just a thought.
No, this is why we're here. And Hilary?
I have so many thoughts on what folks are saying here. I just want to pick up on something that Kevin mentioned before when he used the word subjective. I think that's completely right. Because we don't have, not just legally, but even sort of commonplace definitions of what sustainable means, what clean means, what environmentally friendly means, pick your words of choice here. There's a lot of flexibility for folks in how they use them. And sometimes it's for good and sometimes it's for not so good. And one of the things we've been advocating for and suggesting at Politically in Fashion was in terms of the green guides, looking at words like sustainable or clean or things like that, is maybe you don't have a hard and fast definition, but put some guardrails on the term, right? So that they actually have some sort of meaning. Because if you just keep throwing around these words, they're going to lose all meaning. I think the worst case scenario is in a consumer think, oh, yeah, I've been trying to shop sustainably, but then they see some bad actor saying that their product's sustainable, and they see that and like, well, if that's sustainable, forget it. It's just too hard. I'm just not even going to bother. And because you're right, the onus should not be on the consumer, right, or the individual in a lot of these cases. And it's hard. I mean, I do this for a living, right? And I've had the luxury of time and work and education to really look into these things. And I get very confused by this. When I was pregnant, I was really looking very intently at what I was putting on and in my body. And it was very confusing. And I was getting very stressed out about it. And you just go down that rabbit hole of looking for things and not getting good answers. Even trying to get rid of some clothes that, I don't work in a corporate environment anymore, some things I don't need. What's the right way to move them along? How do these clothes find a good home? Hopefully a lot of them are still in good shape. Some are not, and what is the end of life cycle for those garments and doing it in a responsible way? And the onus right now is on the consumer for all of that. And that's really tough. And so we need to work to change some of that.
And we have an audience question. And one audience member has asked, can you all speak on the increase of both sustainable companies and big fast fashion companies, for example, Shein? It almost feels like we are seeing two competing movements, but both feel very consumerist and capitalist. And I'll open it up to anybody who wants to start.
I can start. Have some strong opinions. So to whoever proposed the questions, their feelings are right. That's exactly what the feeling that you get is how everyone else feels. I think these bigger companies that are coming on board and really using, like Hilary said, the word sustainable and a lot of that, it's kind of a way to, they're using specific parts of the process of make that is sustainable so they can overpower and use that word in a marketing. It's just a marketing ploy, which make you, obviously as a consumer, you feel good about purchasing then. But if you really understand, and I deal with this with my own brand, is that it's hard for me to produce something and sell it sustainably at a price at what the production is, when Shein is selling it for $15 and saying it's sustainable. So I think you can look at it at a way as like, okay, if it is sustainable, exactly like Jasmine said, sustainable does not really, it's not affordable. Like if we really want to be honest, if you're buying real sustainable, it's not as affordable. So I would say these big companies, they're just trying to use the word sustainable. I think even like there's other terminology being used to kind of make you guys feel a little bit better about buying things. But you just have to understand and do your research and understand what those real sustainable brands are. And my rule of thumb is if it's priced to go, it's typically not truly sustainable throughout. So that's my take on it.
Anybody else want to add?
I think part of it too is our value system and the idea of this conspicuous consumption of just having so much, and that's being the end goal of what we want. And we lose sight of the value of the product itself, the people who made it, the process that went into it. For me, the 3 Ps are what's really important to define sustainability. You can't have sustainability without acknowledging all 3 of those aspects. You know, people, these you know, clothing hauls you see online, to me, this is very disrespectful of the whole, of your own money, right? Of what you spend on it, of the people who made it, of the water that went into making it, and the end product. And so, you know, to the extent we can refocus and not think about just the sheer volume of things that we buy, and just putting a value on what we do buy. And value means if something is inexpensive or expensive, it's still a value that you've put on it. You have chosen to spend your hard-earned money to buy this product. People have spent their time to make this product, whether it be, you know, by hand in a beautiful artisan in Northern Italy, or whether it be a big factory in China. There's still a human putting this together, and we need to respect that and think about that process when we're buying things.
I really like that poignant moment at the end. There's a human who has made this product. There's a human who has, created this product. So yes, I do like that at the end. We have another audience question. The audience has.
You just give a perspective coming from like a mother's standpoint. And when it comes to, like, I come from like a real place where I have to go out and I have to buy clothes for a child who is going to grow. And I do not want to invest in a large amount of money for clothes that will be worn for a season or less.
If that, yeah.
And so just to give some, concretize, like, how do you balance the needs and the pockets that you have versus the values and the morals that you hold? One thing that I don't believe in, like, I'm going to buy this like extremely special fancy thing on Shein because it's cheaper here. My question when it comes to my child is, okay, is this going to be donatable to a nephew, a friend, a colleague, someone? So pretty much when his clothes got worn out, I said, this is gently worn. I know that this is going to go to this particular friend of a friend who just had a baby. Because I do understand that, when it comes to yourself, like as an adult, like you can say like, okay, I can buy quality, I can buy sustainable, I can buy lasting. When it comes to raising small children and growing teenagers, it may not be a feasible moral ground. So it's really about like finding a way. If it's your moral compass, how are you going to feel that you're doing a sustainable action? Even if you can't afford to buy sustainable for your 4-year-old, your 10-year-old, how are you going to initiate a sustainable action? Because I don't want people to think like, oh, they're talking about stuff I can never afford. It's not really about the affordability, it's the mindset and the moral ground you have to commit to something like this.
Mhm.
And I think I see that a lot, and I struggle with that too. I feel like people get shamed for, if you know, look, if you need to buy, you know, $10 jeans because you got 4 kids that are growing all the time, right? Like that shouldn't be a judgment call that we make. But I do call out, you know, some celebrities who are glorifying this cheap fashion when that's not their economic situation, right? And I think you have to strike a balance there and be respectful of people's economic needs. And unfortunately, you know, we control only so much what happens in factories overseas. We work on that in public policy areas and things like that, so that the women, primarily women who are working in these factories, are working in healthy and safe environments. But ultimately, we don't want to shame people if that's what you need to purchase to clothe your own children. But I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. Like, if you can think how you can pay this forward to somebody else, right? And think how else can it be used? And it's a struggle to strike that balance. But I think we need to be respectful of folks' economic situation. And I don't think that message gets out enough. And I'm sorry, you probably hear my 1-year-old screaming upstairs right now.
Yeah. It's perfectly okay. And Kevin, I see you unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, you know, I think that all these points are absolutely phenomenal. I think from where I look at from a consumer base is that obviously as a designer, I do strive to make sure that things are priced at a price point that people can enjoy. But it is very hard to compete with if I'm coming out with a pair, let's say a pair of jeans, and then a company is getting a $10 jean. How do you drive home why my jeans are worth that more, and why should you buy with my company versus buying with the company that has the bigger reach, the bigger marketing push, the more placement, where I may be just producing the jeans one by one, packaging them myself, putting them in a you know, a box, shipping them to you. I definitely think that what I've learned is bringing people into the consumers into the process was very where I found the unlock, where I can show them the process that I go into creating my garment, and they're seeing the person and a human touch it. That is where the real value lies, is when you can see that there's somebody touching this garment. Because a lot of we're talking about, you know, manufacturers, and I've worked with several manufacturers, but a lot of these manufacturing companies are going digital, and there are not people touching fashion anymore. So we're starting to see machinery and technology produce these clothing because the demand is so high. And a lot of the companies that can afford to sell a top for $15, they're getting flack for paying a woman to sit there and like pennies on the dollar. So they're moving to technology so they can still produce and sell it at $15. So I've learned that, and what I try to tell my consumers is that come on the journey with me to see how I actually produce. That way you can feel a sense of pride of owning something. And then I also allow the consumers let them know that it is okay, in the life of my garment, what that care is, how to care for that garment, how to actually be sustainable within wash and wear, whether it's dry clean only, whether it should be, you know, hung to dry. Those are really important care instructions I think we get completely away from, because the minute something starts to not perform for us, most consumers, they're ready to pitch it. And a lot of times it's us mishandling the care of the garment that causes the garment not to do what it needs to do and stay within our care for the length of time that it should be with us. So I think education there from our part is important too, as creators too.
Before we move on, this is such a rich topic, and thank you to the audience member who posed that question, because it brought so much feedback and thought. Going on what you said about the care, a month or so ago, a Twitter user showed a picture of her Telfar bag, which is made with vegan leather, that had been, you know, because of wear and tear, it just was, you know, beyond repair. And she she felt almost, well, it wasn't, I don't think it was she, I think it was they faulted the company because they felt that because it was made with vegan leather, it wasn't as good as leather. So why, like almost like they felt that they were cheated. So, they had a lot of backlash from commenters that said, if you've been using this for 4 years, then you've gotten your money's worth. But it was showing, but I think the commenter had tried to suggest was because it was vegan leather, it wasn't as quality as leather. And therefore it just didn't last as long as it did. So, but whoever posed that audience member who posed that question, thank you so much. And keep the questions going. We want to hear from you. The Q&A at the bottom is ready. Type. So another audience question is—
I think Dr. Burgie had his hand up.
Oh, Dr. Burgie, I'm so sorry. Go on.
Oh, thank you. I was just yeah, question. I actually had a question for Hilary and Jasmine, because you were bringing up policy, and the thing I grapple with is bringing the human factor into fashion. There are human impacts. If people are exposed to this, it might result in this. I always think about, when they had the Bangladesh factory fire, that was 100 years after the one that happened in Triangle Shirtwaist. And then a year later, then they had the collapse that had, 1,000 people versus 100. So it's something where when it happened in our country, it was a big issue, but once it sort of moved out of sight, it moved out of mind. And is there a way of sort of compelling stories to get people to realize that, especially with the internet being what it is, these are real people behind these fashions. These are real people behind these things. Can it be a compelling way of telling these things so that when people buy fashions, they buy from a certain company, they are sort of forced to think about sourcing as far as this is what happens when things are not produced properly, when people are not utilizing things properly. This is why policies have to be in place, because these are the kind of things that can happen. So from your opinions, what do you think it would take? What kind of research, what kind of, raw material data would you need kind of get that story moving and get people to really think about it that way? Maybe that might be the impetus to change people's way of thinking about fashion.
And I open it up. I do like what you said, the human aspect of policy. And whenever I think of policy, I always think, we have policies for the people, and we shouldn't be thinking of policy without thinking of people. So always keep the people in the policy, because that's why we have it, right? To protect people, or to bring a program to people, or to bring necessary funding to people, whatever the goal, it's to benefit people in society. But I open it up to the floor. I think you said these questions were directed to either Hilary or Jasmine.
Yeah, one of the things, when you're talking about you're in occupational health, like there are policies that we have within the United States such that certain things wouldn't happen. Therefore, we get it done somewhere else such that it can happen. And there has to be some feedback checkpoints such that we realize that our nation's health is also connected to global health, and that we shouldn't be thinking of, as long as my people are good, then we're all set. Like, we're all in this together. And there's ripple effects that happen climate-wise that everyone's experiencing. And if we're talking about we're all in this together, that's a very obvious display. And then the other thing I was going to say, when it relates to like what evidence we have, we have tons of evidence as it relates to occupational health. Like, it's one of the foundations of public health. So we know in that sense. But when we think about the ramifications, we also have to consider the multi-generational effects that these things have. So, for example, the social determinants of health are not just like, I don't cough, like my physical health. It's economic health, it's educational health, it's wealth, it's all of the things that make your life of quality. And when we start thinking about lives lost, like those individuals, that's a trickle down effect that affects that nation's economy, that actually trickles down and affects us. Ukraine's war affects us. We are not in this alone. And so I think a lot of people in public health are realizing that COVID really did open the door to realizing that. I think when it comes to fashion, I really like, Kevin, like you're pretty much saying you show how the sausage is made. And oftentimes when you show how the sausage is made and when people start saying like, maybe I don't want to eat sausage, you know, like maybe I want a different choice. And it's not just lip service. And that comes like the fast food industry, PFAS, like all of these movements where we've seen like big changes. Globally, our eyes were open to how the sausage was made. So I do wonder if there's a way that the fashion industry can, you know, open people's eyes that what is real life? Like, what is it in real time? Such that there's a greater appreciation for what goes into it.
So we are having a very good discussion, and time flies by when you are having fun, because it's almost 8:60. But I do want to get to some audience questions, and one will be it's a question for Dr. Burgie. Lots of skin products contain very dangerous preservatives that cause cancer. So what type of preservatives on skin products, such as lotions, etc., are safe to use when we buy them?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't have the answer to that, but there are websites that do explore that. Skin Deep is one environmental working group. And you also have,
Well, I know it's a question for Dr. Burgie, but I want to shameless plug WE Act. WE Act for Environmental Justice passed the legislation in both the House and the Senate that bans mercury out of skin personal care products. So that is another way we can have those dangerous preservatives out of lotions and products. And back to you, Dr.
and
PFAS as well.
Yes. Jasmine, would you like to add?
There's a lot of existing websites that you can use where you can scan your product. Silent Spring Institute has one called Detox Me EWG, where you scan the product and it gives you the dangerous chemicals that may be in it. So that's any personal care product. When it comes to breast cancer prevention partners, they're based in California, and their main thing is to reduce toxic exposures to improve women, to eradicate breast cancer. They have done a lot of legislation, a lot of policies get passed in California, and they're kind of like that foreground. Like if it can get passed in California, maybe we can get it passed in other places. They have the campaign. They've introduced 4 bills into legislation. They have the Fake Campaign Act, which gives you information on different personal care products that are less toxic. And being released, I think in October, is the Black Beauty List, which also gives you a list of products that are marketed to Black women that are safer or safe to use. So there's a lot of organizations like these WE Act, Breast Cancer Prevention Partners, Silent Spring Institute, EWG, that's their focus, is to tell you consumers exactly what to buy.
Thank you so much. And another question from the audience. Can you discuss toxic chemicals used to break down textile waste? And another part to that question is there another solution to break down textiles in landfills? Anybody? Feel free.
Not my area, I'm afraid, but I'd be interested to know too.
Well, there's a
Right.
lot of toxic chemicals in textile waste. I think I think as a whole, we kind of focus on not having those toxic chemicals be in the textiles, and that so it does not sit and degrade or in the waste, such as, like, as we talked about, PFAS, which doesn't break down and things like that. And we have another audience question. What are your thoughts on the proliferation of recycled PET clothing, especially with athletic wear, being marketed as sustainable? And I open that up to anybody.
I'll chime in here because I gave a partial answer there. I was going to say that recycled plastics have been used in synthetic materials for a long time, so it's not new, but it's probably more just a new marketing tool for people. Otherwise, it's been very rare that they use virgin plastics and things like polyester or what have you. PET is usually a plastic water bottle, so it's clear, so it's pretty versatile to use. But again, with anything, it's also, you have to be aware of greenwashing. So the percentage of recycled material that they're actually using is a big question. It could be a very small percentage, and then they're marketing it as sustainable. But in general, I think it's just a new way for companies to say something is sustainable when really it's kind of a rather banal, because they've always used recycled plastics for synthetic materials.
And thank you, Sophia. Sophia is a WeAct team member, so yay, Sophia. Also, still time to get in the chat. So if you have a Q&A that you would like answered, we're still here for you. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should have a Q&A feature, and you click on that, type in your question. So one other question we have is, are there toxic chemicals in fashion and or beauty that the consumer is not aware of but is purchasing?
Well, I had a conversation with someone from the Environmental Protection Agency at a playgroup. And one of the things that they alerted me to is like mascara and pretty much the water, like 24-hour makeup or water resistant eyeliner. And they were saying that, they haven't released the data or released the information, but it's looking like for these makeup products to be water resistant and long lasting, there are chemicals in there that make that happen that we're putting directly close to our orifice. We should not. And she was just saying that there needs to be more public health research, because they're seeing that there are toxins in there that are high concentrations and are often not considered.
I've seen that too, that the PFAS, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, they are in the long-lasting mascaras, which can then get into your eyes via the tear ducts. The lipsticks, we eat something like 22 pounds of lipstick in our lifetime. They're in there. And what's really scary is that it's not disclosed. Even if you were to look at all the ingredients, like I said, like PFAS is in here. And there's a recent study that showed how many products have these chemicals in them. And they're nicknamed forever chemicals because they literally don't break down. They are with us forever. And there is legislation to address this in drinking water. There's legislation to address this in cosmetics. And it's great that there's bills out there on that, but we need to get it over the finish line here, right? And that's where consumer activism comes in. That's where reaching out to your elected official and letting them know this is important to you and why. Finding like-minded individuals or groups, like WeAct or other folks who are engaged on these types of issues, and let your voice be known. Because, the fact that it doesn't get done in Congress doesn't always mean that Congress is against it. It's just that there are so many issues out there. And you need to have the voice and be present and show up and say, like, this is important to me and this is why, and find a champion in Congress who will advocate for this legislation. Super important.
I 100% agree with that, Hilary. Hilary also has a newsletter that kind of details the policy aspects as well. So it is 8:25. Can we believe? Time has flown. Okay. And I feel
And
like
that 1-year-old is still awake. I hear her upstairs.
you know, they have so much energy at this age, you know.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna sleep right now. I'm never not tired. You know. So I just feel like I've been having a little coffee chat with friends, or maybe a little nightcap with friends, and talked about all of these very pressing issues. And it's just great to hear like-minded individuals discuss all that's going on within the fashion industry, because with the glamour and all that, you know, surrounds fashion, there are heavy implications to it. And I also want to pinpoint our Beauty Inside Out working group, which Beauty Inside Out is one of our campaigns. It's under the branch of environmental health. Our colleague, Sophia, who is in the panel, and he's invisible, but he's here. It's Jaron Burke. They head up this working group, and it is the working group takes place. I'm gonna say, I don't know when. It's every 4 weeks.
No, it's every third Wednesday of the month, from 6:30 to 7:30 online, and it's a mix of both education on these topics, advocacy as well, and helping to contribute to our campaign, Beauty Inside Out, which is looking at toxic chemicals in beauty products marketed to people of color. So if you're interested, I put it in the chat. Feel free to email me to get more information and to be put on our mailing list and to join our working group.
And we are also looking for a survey. So our Beauty Inside Out, we are conducting a research, and as part of our campaign, we are looking for teens between the ages of 13 and 17, but parental permission is required. And you will also receive a Subway restaurant gift card, and I like free things, so. And it is open to girls and STEM identifying people of color between 13 to 17 years of age that live in Northern Manhattan, which would include West Harlem, Central Harlem, East Harlem, Inwood, and Washington Heights.
And the South Bronx as well.
So you said you put in the chat?
No, I said we also include the South Bronx. So if you're interested in learning more about the survey, yeah, we have the link right there. So it would be great. Spread the word to all the teens you know, because we don't know any teens. So we need your help, but yeah.
Yes. And again, I'm going to say thank you to all of our panelists. Such a robust discussion. I was a little scared because I was like, oh, I don't know. And now we have this panel, and I just feel like we could have gone on for another hour, but who has time? But I do thank you for your insights, and such a wonderful discussion. And if your question did not get answered in the Q&A, please send it you can send it to me, Yuwa at weact.org, and I can send it to our panelists, and hopefully we can get an answer to you. So I'm gonna put my emails in the chat. And if you have another question and it didn't get answered during this session, and I think everybody who spent their Fashion Week night with us, I wish we could have all been in person, but you know what, maybe next year. And we can possibly, you know, wear fancy, our latest and greatest, and talk about fashion. Kevin can dress us all.
Yes, I can.
I'm taking you up on that.
So with that, I bid everybody good night, and we ask staff to stay online.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.